Justin Haskins, he is the co-author of The Great Reset, Dark Future, and the latest book that we've been working on in the last year, which releases October 22nd. You can pre-order it now, Propaganda Wars. Kind of an important book for today, especially with everything that we're talking about. But I want to talk to him now about what has happened at the UN this weekend with the United Nations Summit of the Future. Justin, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Glenn. Good to be back with you.
Yeah.
I wish I had better news. I'm getting the reputation around Mercury Studios as being kind of like the angel of death.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know. Pretty much everybody who's coming on that on this show today is kind of like, more good news from you, huh? Thank you for watching this so closely. First of all, explain what the Summit of the Future was.
Yeah, so the Summit of the Future was the culmination of several years of work. It really began during the COVID era in 2020, 2021, with the UN Secretary General producing this report called Our Common Agenda, which is something that you've talked about in several shows and specials and things like that. And so the culmination of all of that was this Summit of the Future that they just held over the weekend prior to the start of their General Assembly. As you noted, there were 3 agreements, all of which came out of Our Common Agenda: Pact for the Future, Declaration of Future Generations, Global Digital Compact. All of this is meant to dramatically expand the power and influence of the United Nations. That's the whole point of it. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they designed it. In fact, I know it's not a coincidence that they designed for all of this. They planned for it to be proposed and approved immediately before the 2024 U.S. presidential election. There's a reason for that, because this is about making sure that there are plans in place, infrastructure in place, if Donald Trump does not win this election, that will further the agenda of the Biden administration and sort of the Great Reset crowd moving forward, no matter who wins.
So talk to me about the Pact for the Future. There are 3 separate parts. And you can look all of this up online, but give me the summary on the Pact for the Future. What is that?
Yes, so the Pact for the Future is a very large document. It includes tons and tons of commitments by member nations. It was approved by basically the entire United Nations over the weekend, including the United States. In fact, Secretary Blinken yesterday afternoon gave a speech praising the Pact for the Future. So it includes all kinds of radical provisions. Probably the most important one, the one that we've been looking at most closely, is something called the Emergency Platform. The idea behind this is to give sweeping powers to the UN Secretary General in the event of a future, what they call global shock, which is not clearly defined in the document. The idea is essentially to expand the power of the Secretary General so that they can better manage at the UN international crises. Okay, so they had COVID in mind when they wrote this. So there is some good news on that. The document, the language for the document at the last minute, and I've been tracking the various revisions and versions and stuff, changed. And they took some of that emergency platform language out and replaced it with this vague promise to have the Secretary General develop a plan in the future. And so they essentially kicked the can down the road, I think, because that provision was becoming a little too controversial.
Wait. This is so fascinating. It was that the Secretary General could just say, this is an emergency, a global shock, and it is let's say, a financial shock. And we've got to stop everybody who is disagreeing with the central banks. We all have to stand by the central banks, and we have to do this and this. And he could dictate what happens in each country, could he not? That's the way it was originally written.
It was really vaguely worded to give him sweeping powers.
Correct.
While also respecting national sovereignty. They would throw in language like that, but to give him sweeping powers in the event of an emergency.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Now, did they write this in the way the Democrats write things, where it's passed and it says pretty much at the time of implementation and at the discretion of the secretary, such and such will happen? Did they write it that way, or does he actually have to come back and propose things, or is it at his discretion?
He has to. So in the up until the very end, the draft was very specifically asking him to give, basically lay out the specific plans for an emergency platform. The final pass language says, this is the actual language. Consider, they want the Secretary General to consider approaches to strengthen the United Nations system response to complex global shocks within existing authorities, and ... It goes on and on and on. But in other words, we want you to re-propose all this stuff in the future.
Okay.
So it did not actually come into international law under this agreement.
All right. So now hang on just a second. One other thing. When we say it passed, there was no actual vote, right? It was you could vote against it, which nobody did. Isn't that right?
They do this a lot. They do this a lot at the United Nations, where they pass things by consensus, is what it's called, and it essentially is a way for them to pass things without having to formally vote for it. But it, in essence, passed. Yes.
That is crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
So now the Declaration on Future Generations, what was that? And this one did not have anything removed from it, right?
As far as I know, no. This is the most idealistic one. The idea behind this is to get younger people more involved in, think Greta Thunberg type, more involved in, their international agreements, creating a new position at the United Nations specifically for that purpose. All these vague commitments to socialistic policies about reducing inequalities between nations and battling climate change and stuff like that. But that one to me was the least objectionable of all of them, just because it was so idealistic and vaguely worded that I don't know how damaging it would be, to be totally honest.
And the Global Digital Compact is the third part, and that passed.
Yeah. This is the most damaging one, I think. I think this is the most disturbing one. This passed as well. Essentially what this is meant to do is a few different things. It's meant to dramatically increase global governance of artificial intelligence. They want to create a couple of different new organizations, an independent international scientific panel on AI and the Global Dialogue on AI Governance Program. They want to have more collaboration with big tech, public-private partnerships, additional funding pumped into that, all of it designed to embed artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies with left-wing social justice goals, essentially, and they're very clear about that in the document. So that's a huge thing we've been warning about for a long time, going, dark future was all about that. We talk about that a ton in propaganda wars and how emerging technologies is going to manipulate every part of our society. And then, of course, misinformation, disinformation, a safe and secure internet, these kinds of things are riddled throughout the Global Digital Compact. This is probably the largest propaganda effort the UN is about to launch, the largest propaganda effort, I think, in modern history. You probably got to go back to like the Soviet Union or something before you're going to find something like this. They want to create all kinds of different collaborations with the media, with big tech companies, to control the internet for misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, etc. So specifically, here's an example. This is from the agreement. This is what was actually approved. This is just one of many examples. Quote, provide, promote, and facilitate access to and dissemination of independent, fact-based, timely, targeted, clear, accessible, multilingual, and science-based information to counter mis and disinformation. Strengthening independent and public media and supporting journalists and media workers Obviously, we're talking about people who share in their values. So we're talking about creating fact-checking apparatuses at the United Nations, creating and disseminating these so-called fact-based, science-based assessments, which we learned during COVID and other eras that's just whatever the UN wants it to be. It isn't actually fact-based or science-based. And then collaborating with social media companies and big tech companies to make sure that the opposite side doesn't get to counter it. They're very clear about calling for social media companies to ramp up content moderation and make their platforms more secure and all this other stuff. So really, you could summarize the whole document like this. The whole point of the Global Digital Compact is to get everybody off the internet that the United Nations doesn't like, to silence people who are not going along with it, and to create a vast propaganda network that is going to constantly be pumping out their own form of misinformation and disinformation, all in the name of allegedly getting to the truth, which of course is not what they're doing.
We just talked to the FCC Commissioner, Brendan Carr, about the sale of the second largest broadcasting group in America and 200 radio stations. It was paid for with foreign money, which is against the FCC regulations. No more than 25% can be from foreign. But Soros wrapped up a bunch of foreign money, and for some reason, they bypassed the law that says that has to go through the Department of Homeland Security and has to have a security check, et cetera, et cetera. So he is going to, as soon as they officially announce it, which could be as early as next week, the sale will go through. We're on some of those stations. You have this happening. The only one that is standing in the way of the global effort to shut voices down, the only one with any real clout is Elon Musk. That's one man against the world.
And they want to stop him too.
Yeah, I know. This just has empowered all of the countries around the world and empowered them through the United Nations and gave them really kind of a blank check to stop people like Elon Musk with anything that it takes. Did it not?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the Global Digital Compact that they just passed. We've talked in previous weeks about this new EU ESG system that they're building in the European Union, which is also designed to do similar things. They're trying to close down all the off-ramps. You've said that for a long time. That's what they've been doing, and they're almost finished with the job. Mm-hmm. They don't want people to have any ability to counter what they're saying in a meaningful way. Yeah, if you want to sit around your kitchen table and talk to your family about things going on in the world, fine. But don't do it in public. Don't do it in a meaningful public way. That's essentially what's going on here. And as information and data and communication has become increasingly more centralized, it's becoming easier and easier to control it and manipulate it. And that is such a huge part of what's going on right now at the United Nations and elsewhere. It's really hard to stop, 1,000 newspapers across the country. It's not hard to stop like 5 social media companies or 5 big tech companies. It's not that hard to do that or to force them to reform their ways. And that is exactly what's going on here. And it's incredibly disturbing, but that's the plan. And there's a reason why, as I said earlier, that they're doing all of this in the final days, final weeks, before the presidential election.
Okay, so I know that we have, I've scheduled an hour with you, but I feel compelled to talk to the audience one-on-one a little bit right after this. So can I get you to come back tomorrow, because you've talked about the governance of artificial intelligence, but we haven't talked about the global wealth transfer or the embedding the GDP with ESG or any of the other things that are now locked in on the globe. Can I get you to come back same time tomorrow?
Of course. Yes, okay. Let's do it.
Justin, thank you so much. I appreciate it.